I'll have to go lower. Can you hold my leg instead?
Yes. Come back up for a minute.
He grunted and pulled me up, throwing me into the air as if I was a sack of groceries, and caught me around the waist as I began to fall. I gasped and grabbed his neck again. What do I do?
First,
he ducked his head and kissed me hard.
Now, wrap your left leg around my waist.
I gave him a look.
Just do it.
I swung back and forth, then managed to hook my leg around his waist. Next, he let go of my waist and grabbed my leg. It was frightening, but I trusted that he was strong enough to hold both of us with only one arm. Compared to this, standing on Ren's shoulders in Kishkinda was child's play. I grimaced, wondering what insane things I'd be expected to do in the next 2 tasks. I mentally willed the branches holding the nest to support us a little bit longer, just long enough for me to grab the scarf. Realistically, I expected to hear them snap at any second, causing us to plummet to our deaths. I let go of Kishan's neck and slowly turned my body upside down, holding the waistband of his pants, then his leg, and then his foot. I mumbled as he lowered me. Why couldn't they pick a girl from Cirque du Soleil to do these tasks? Hanging upside down from a broken branch thousands of feet in the air is just too much to ask from a girl in beginner wushu.
Kels.
What?
Shut up and get the scarf.
I'm working on it. I stretched farther and heard Kishan groan. Just another few inches. His grip slipped deliberately from my calf to my ankle, causing me to swing out over the green abyss. Frightened, I yelled Kishan's name and closed my eyes for a second, swallowed, and swung my body back toward the scarf. The wind whipped it off the branch. It swirled in the air and shot past me. I grabbed the tail of it at the last second, hanging upside down, blood pounding in my head, the tips of my fingers desperately grasping the scarf, with Kishan barely holding on for both of us, and had a vision. The green canopy dizzily swinging back and forth in front of my eyes faded to white, and I heard a voice.
Kelsey. Miss Kelsey. Can you hear me?
Mr. Kadam? Yes, I can hear you. I saw the vague outline of a tent behind him. I can see your tent.
And I can see you and Kishan.
What? I looked behind me and saw a blurred image of Kishan clutching the leg of my upside-down limp body. The scarf dangled precariously from a hooked finger. I heard him shouting as if from a great distance.
Kelsey, hold on.
The vague outline of another person was coming into view. Mr. Kadam instructed.
Don't say anything. Don't let him provoke you into speaking. Just pay attention to every detail. Anything could help us find Ren.
Okay. Mr. Kadam's medallion was glowing red. I glanced at mine and saw it was bright red too. When I looked back up, the image of the other person solidified. Lokesh. He was dressed in a business suit. His dark hair was slicked back, and I noticed that he wore several rings. His medallion was also glowing red and was much larger than ours. His deceitful eyes glittered when he smiled.
Ah, I've been wondering when I'd see you again.
He spoke politely, as if we were getting reacquainted at an afternoon tea party.
You have cost me a great deal in time and resources, my dear.
I watched him silently and flinched as he appraised me in a disturbing way. Lokesh spoke quietly, menacingly.
We've not the time for niceties of the game I would prefer, so I'll be blunt. I want the medallion you're wearing. You will bring it to me. If you do, I will let your tiger live. If you don't...
He took a knife out of his pocket and tested its sharpness on a thumb.
I will find you, slit your throat.
He looked directly into my eyes to conclude his threat.
And take it from your bloody neck.
Mr. Kadam countered.
Leave the young lady out of this. I will meet you and give you what you want. In exchange, you will let the tiger go free."
Lokesh turned to Mr. Kadam and smiled unpleasantly.
"I do not recognize you, my friend. I am interested to know how you acquired the amulet. If you wish to negotiate, you may contact my business office in Mumbai." "And which office would that be, my friend?" "Find the tallest building in Mumbai. My office is the penthouse."
Mr. Kadam nodded, as Lokesh continued to give instructions. As they talked, I studied the hazy scene that had appeared behind Lokesh. I memorized as many details as I could. A man was speaking to him, but Lokesh paid him no heed. The servant behind Lokesh had black hair that was swept forward into a bun resting just above the top of his hairline. Across the length of his forehead, he had a line of black tattoos that looked like the Sanskrit words from the prophecy. Bare-chested, the man wore loops of handmade bead necklaces. His ears were pierced in several places with golden hoops. He was also pulling along another man and gestured to him. The second man stood farther back with his head hanging down. Matted, filthy black hair hung in his face. Bleeding and bruised, he struggled against the hands of the man holding him. The servant yelled and yanked the man forward until he staggered and fell to his knees. Then he slapped him across the face and yanked his shoulders back. As the injured man looked up, his hair fell to the side, and I gazed into piercing cobalt blue eyes. Overcome with emotion, I took a step forward and shouted, "Ren!" He didn't hear me. His head drooped down to his chest. I started crying. Someone did hear me, though. Lokesh. He narrowed his eyes and whipped around to see what I was looking at. He tried to speak to his servants, but they didn't hear him. He turned back to me, and for the first time, studied the wispy images behind my shoulder. Everything was already fading. I couldn't tell if Lokesh recognized Kishan or not. I froze and willed him to see only me. Lokesh did focus his attention on me. He gestured to Ren, and with false sympathy, clucked his tongue. "How terribly painful it must be for you to see him like this. You know, between you and me, he screams out for you when I torture him. Unfortunately for him, he's been quite unforthcoming as to your whereabouts." He chuckled. "He won't even tell me your first name, though I already know what it is. It's Kelsey, isn't it?" Lokesh watched my expression carefully, waiting for me to give away a clue. He continued his mocking diatribe. "It's become something of a sticking point between us. The prince is so tight-lipped he won't even confirm your given name. I must say I expected as much. He's always been quite stubborn. More tears? How sad. He can't hold out forever, you know. The pain alone should have killed him by now. Fortunately, his body seems quite resilient." He watched me out of the corner of his eyes while he cleaned microscopic dirt from under his fingernails. "I have to admit, I've quite enjoyed torturing him. It's the best of both worlds, seeing him suffer, both as a man and as an animal. The exquisite lengths I can go to are unheard of. He heals so quickly that even I have been unable to test his limits. I assure you, though, I am making every effort." I bit my trembling hand to stifle a sob and glanced at Mr. Kadam. He shook his head discreetly, indicating to keep quiet. Lokesh smiled sardonically. "Perhaps if you would just confirm your name, I might give him a brief reprieve. A simple nod would suffice. It is Kelsey Hayes, is it not?" Mr. Kadam's warning raced through my thoughts. It took all my determination, but I kept my eyes focused on Ren. Tears ran down my face, but I didn't move or even look at Lokesh. He became angry.
Certainly, if you care for him, you would spare him some pain. Ease his anguish. No? Perhaps I was mistaken in your affections. I am relatively sure that I am not mistaken in his. He won't speak of you at all except to call out in his dreams for his beloved. Or perhaps you are not the one he begs for.
His voice started to fade.
Ah, well, the two brothers were not always lucky in love, were they? Maybe it is time to put him out of his misery. It seems to me as if I'd be doing him a favor.
I couldn't help it. I screamed, "No!" He raised his eyebrows and spoke again. But his words were too quiet to hear. When the three of us could no longer hear one another, Mr. Kadam turned to me. Lokesh was gesturing with his hands, but I ignored him and focused on Mr. Kadam as he faded to white. I wiped away my tears while he smiled sympathetically and then winked at me just before he disappeared. I blinked, and white turned to green. Blood pounded in my head. Kishan was yelling at me.
Kelsey, snap out of it."
Fortunately, I was still holding the scarf. I shouted, "Got it! Pull me up, Kishan."
"Kelsey, watch out!"
A bird screeched above us. I twisted and saw the gaping black maw of a metallic bird and got an up-close and personal view of its green, verdigris-coated, double-edged scissor beak. I shot a bolt of lightning into its beak, and it took off squawking, smoke trailing from its mouth. With a mighty grunt, Kishan swung me upright. I grabbed his waist and held on for dear life. He let go of me, trusting I'd have the muscle to cling to him. I wrapped my arms around him, grabbed my wrists to lock my arms at his waist, and clutched the scarf in my hands. He pulled himself over the edge of the broken nest and helped me over. His arms shook with fatigue. Kishan sat up and inspected my limbs.
"Kels, are you okay? What happened to you?"
"Another vision," I breathed. "Tell you about it later." We ducked as a bird called out nearby. I picked up our backpack and stowed the bow and quiver, which had magically refilled with golden arrows, as well as the scarf and chakram.
"Okay, now what?"
he said. "Now we make our escape. Come on."